Hello and welcome. My name is Karan Bir Singh. I'm a program manager on Windows Security here at Microsoft. Windows 10 was a really interesting release from an identity point of view, with major additions like Azure AD Join, Web Account Manager, Microsoft Passport, and Windows Hello. Today, what I want to talk to you guys about are just a high-level overview on all of these things, and more importantly, how they fit together, how they work with each other. And hopefully help you guys form a mental model around the identity investments in Windows 10. One of the things that's really important to understand how Windows 10 was designed is to just know about the trends that led us to where we are today. There were primarily two basic trends. The first one being, with Windows 8.1, that was the first release we brought Microsoft accounts, Microsoft's consumer identity system, onto Windows as a first-class citizen. It allowed for consumers to take their Microsoft accounts and go through the out-of-the-box experience, provision their devices, and finally make it to their desktop. The desktop that was alive, and it was alive using the power of Microsoft accounts as the backbone. Things like roaming, my start screen taking on my personality. You were able to access the store and acquire all the apps. And there were a lot of these features that were really, really loved. But when we thought about, and when we got a lot of feedback actually from our enterprise customers, how they loved all the new functionality that Microsoft accounts offered. But at the same time, it wasn't exactly in line with the enterprise needs. Number two trend, as we were designing Windows 10 and thinking about what are all the things we want to do in the identity space, were that we found that, well, 2/3 of employees are using their personal devices now at work. The very nature of work is changing. I mean, a lot of times employees are no longer even at the workplace as they're working. They're working out of homes, they're working out of cafes, they're working out of customer sites, on the air, you name it. And so as a result of that, you're also seeing that many of these applications that enterprises had are in the process of moving to the cloud. And so what we wanted to do with Windows 10 was make sure that we bridged the old with the new, and we took what people really liked in the form of Microsoft accounts and all the functionality that was added, and made that available to our enterprise customers also. And that is what we ended up doing. Now, obviously, there are a lot of trends, BYOD and choose your own device, and the traditional way that folks tend to deploy devices. And in order to make sense of all these various permutations and combinations, we ended up defining a mental model. By the way, this is a slide I'm going to keep on going back to just to reflect how we progressed from one part to the next. And so when we think of Microsoft Windows devices, the pivots that helped us make sense of all the various combinations that people use our devices in. So there were two major pivots. The first one being ownership, and the second one being, which sort of dovetails from ownership, and the next step is the purpose that this device is going to be used for. So in the ownership, we broke it down in two major segments. Either a device is personally owned, you use your own money to buy it, or a device is actually bought or is owned by your organization. And based on that, obviously the purpose of the device is defined. If this is, let's say, this phone, right, I have with me right now, is my device, and obviously I use it for my personal use. At the same time, I do find myself setting up my work email so that I can check my work email as well as calendar invites. If a device, like let's say this laptop that I have, this is owned by my company, and I primarily use this for work. Now, as you can imagine, in the personal space, where I was using this device for myself, Microsoft accounts and what we added in 8.1 was something that met the modern needs. But what I want to focus on today is on the work part. How did Windows identity evolve for the workplace? So let's take these two categories one by one, and let's look at the options that are available that can be leveraged. So organizationally owned devices that are primarily used for work. What are the two main ways in which these are deployed in an organization? Well, the newest way that we added in Windows 10 is called Azure AD Join. What is Azure AD Join? Well, what we did was we took Azure AD and made it a first-class citizen and brought it to Windows. What that means is it is now possible for an information worker to use their Azure AD work or school account and go through the entire life cycle of setting up a device to using it. You could pick up a brand new shrink-wrap device right in the out-of-box experience, specify your work account. Now, if that work account is set up such that let's say your enterprise uses MDM to manage this device, MDM enrollment automatically happens. And then you can use this Azure Active Directory account to log on to Windows. And from there on out, all of the same services that were lit up using Microsoft Account for consumers in 8.1 have now been lit up for information workers using Azure AD accounts. And these are things like roaming your background wallpaper or your credentials, having seamless single sign-on access to all of the inbox applications, as well as websites that are a relying party of Azure AD like SharePoint. This also gets you access to the store where you can acquire various enterprise apps that have been purchased by your company. And so this is the major, one of the major things that was added in Windows 10. And I'm happy to also announce that now the same functionality in the form of Azure AD Join is available on Windows Phone 10 as well. So you can take your phone and go through the same process and set it up for work as a primary device. And of course, there's the traditional domain join that we all are really familiar with and has been the way that most enterprises deploy work devices, especially desktops and PCs. But we didn't really stop there. Since we were really keen on embracing the cloud and bringing Azure AD as a first-class citizen to Windows, we also enhanced the domain join functionality, where it is now possible for you to set up your enterprise such that using the power of AAD Connect, where a traditional domain join desktop, which is obviously meant to access any on-prem resources, can now also seamlessly access all the same cloud resources as well. I'm not going to go into too many details, but at the end of this presentation, I do have some pointers that I highly recommend you check out. Those are presentations and blogs that we've done in the past that go into the details of what Azure AD Join is and how one deploys it, as well as how do you get AAD connectivity working with domain join as well. Cool. So now we've looked at how org-owned devices can be deployed in an organization. Let's talk about the other category, a personally owned device that is used for work sometimes. So the BYOD category. Since this is a major trend that we're seeing the industry embrace, we've updated Windows 10 to make it possible for you as a consumer or as an information worker / consumer to add your work account on a device that was primarily meant for personal use. You can do so by just simply going to Settings, Accounts, and adding your work account. Same thing where you go and set up this work account, specify your username and your account details. If your enterprise is set up such that it requires MDM enrollment, all of that just magically happens as a byproduct of you adding your work account. And then subsequently, you get access to the data that you really want, like your apps. It's easy, one click, you just add this work account and you start syncing email. Or you go to the browser and you want to access SharePoint and you're just single signed on in. So this is an excellent, excellent way of making sure that your information workers can get to your enterprise resources on a personally owned device. All right, so I want to draw your attention to the highlighted part where, for work, there's two options, domain join and Azure AD join. And in the BYOD category, where you have personal devices, add a work account. So just to go back to the devices I have right here. This personally owned device phone, I've added a work account and I'm able to access all of my organizational data. And this particular laptop that I'm using for this presentation is actually Azure AD Join and lets me do all the things that I need to do to get work done. Now, obviously, when we think of a couple of models in the form of Azure AD Join and Domain Join and add a work account, it's very obvious, so especially when you're in the hybrid category. What I mean by that is, if you're a cloud-only company And then it's pretty obvious that Azure AD Join is primarily the best suited for you. But and on the other extreme, if most of your resources are on-prem, and in that case, Domain Join is the way to go. But in most cases, we have a lot of our enterprises that are hybrid. They have some resources that are hosted on-prem, and there are some resources that are hosted in the cloud. And in that case, well, what do? How do you choose between Domain Join versus Azure AD Join? So here's some pivots to think about that'll hopefully help you make that decision and make it very apparent as to which is the best option for you. The first one we already talked about, ownership. Obviously in the Domain Join case and the Azure AD Join case, well, the ownership does lie with the organization, so that doesn't really help you decide too much. But when it comes to other things like provisioning, well, how do you want to provision and manage these provision these devices? Is this going to be something that your IT admin is going to do on the behalf of your information worker and then hand these devices over to them? Or is it going to be something that, well, you expect your information worker to go through? So IT configured or self-provisioned. So Domain Join is really good when it comes to your IT provisioning, and especially if you have business processes already in place. But if you have a lot of use cases where you want, like let's say you've embraced choose your own device and you want your information workers to just go ahead and purchase this device on their own and then set it up and bring it into work, Azure AD Join is a great example of the deployment type that you want to choose. Moving on, sometimes the pivot really is, well, you don't care about how the device is provisioned, but you really care about how it's managed. And with Domain Join, let's say if you already have existing management solutions like SCCM or group policy in place, then maybe you just want to stick with a Domain Join. However, if you primarily manage devices using an MDM solution, Azure AD Join has richer integration with MDM. Then also, like I talked about, the resources that you expect your information worker to access is something you must consider. Like, is this primarily going to always be used to access on-prem resources, or is this a device that's probably going to always be used to access cloud resources? The next pivot is just deployment of is it a traditional workplace deployment? Like I said, someone comes into work and you hand them a new PC or a tablet for work? Or is this one where it's the choose your own device, where I go to the store and just purchase a device that I bring into work? Or on the other extreme, add a work account where, well, it is my device that I use for personal use, but I allow my information workers to bring that into work and be able to access work resources with. And finally, it also depends on the kind of devices you have deployed and the device capabilities that they have. What I mean by that is a phone traditionally cannot be domain joined. But if you want a phone to be used for work purposes and you want to hand it out to your employees, it is possible to Azure AD join this device. So just thinking about these pivots in the form of ownership, how they're provisioned, how you want to manage them, the kind of resources that they're going to be primarily used to access, your deployment trends, and finally the kinds of devices you want to deploy. So these things hopefully help you decide between the various options that Windows 10 has in the form of setting it up for work. Moving on. Great, so you've been able to set up a device and be able to manage it, but at the end of the day, identity is really not just a means to an end, isn't it? It's really about making sure that your information workers are able to get work done, are able to get to what is most important to them, which is being able to access the apps that they need in order to get stuff done, if they can get to corporate resources that they really want to. And in order to do that, what we also added in Windows 10 is a new authentication infrastructure called the Web Account Manager. The Web Account Manager is a set of APIs that your applications can use to connect seamlessly to to access the resources that your information workers most want to access. So you can leverage the logged on user's identity. So in this case, when we talked about, let's go back to Microsoft, let's go back to Windows 8.1, where if a user logged in with their Microsoft accounts and finally made it to your desktop and clicked on the Mail app, you see that the Mail app automatically is able to pull the logged on user's identity, the MSA in this case, and start syncing email. Now, that is also available with Azure AD, with all the inbox apps like I mentioned, but more importantly, if you want to write an app that does the same, it is possible by using the Web Account Manager. So Web Account Manager is a great option. I'm not going to go into too many details because this was something that I did cover at Build actually last year, and I'm going to point to those resources in the form of the video and as well as the samples. But what I want you to take away from it is that Web Account Manager APIs are the ones that you could use to get your apps and services get single sign-on based on the logged on user's identity, right? The other thing that I also want to highlight, and like I said, more details offline, is that Web Account Manager is actually extensible. What that means is this same authentication infrastructure is actually pluggable. We made sure that Microsoft accounts and Azure AD plugged into the Web Account Manager, but it is something that if you're an identity provider yourself, or if you have a suite of applications that use your custom services for identity, it is possible for you to author an app or a provider that plugs into the Web Account Manager to also extend that functionality. So we made sure that the Web Account Manager APIs are actually available on all SKUs that run Windows 10. So you just write one app and just make it seamlessly work across the board. And I just want to highlight again that with Azure AD Join now available on phone, the same UWP app that you wrote for your desktop and that connected to Azure AD using the Web Account Manager APIs also just seamlessly starts working on the phone as well. So far we've talked about devices, ownership, the purpose, the deployment model, and finally, Web Account Manager, as you can tell, is the solution that actually spans across these deployment types. And you just want to know about these APIs, and sometimes let's say you want to write an app that only focuses on Microsoft account. Well, you can use the same set of APIs to do that. Sometimes you may want to choose to write an app that only works with Azure AD and, again, Web Account Manager. And sometimes there's actually an interesting use case where your app knows how to handle both Microsoft accounts and Azure AD, but you want to curate the experience based on how the device was set up. So, for example, let's say you were writing a store client, and you want the store client to default to a consumer catalog if the user had logged in with their personal identity, but you wanted to go to the enterprise catalog if the user had logged in with their work identity. So Web Account Manager, once again, makes that possible. So you can just target the logged on users and the context in which they're running, and then curate the experience in your apps. All right, moving on. Now, what we've talked about so far are how identity evolved in Windows 10, how we made it possible for developers to leverage those enhanced identity options. What I want to talk about now is how identity and the way it's represented has also undergone a big evolution in Windows 10 in the form of Microsoft Passport and Windows Hello. Now, the reality is this. Password theft is an epidemic, right? We hear every day, actually, we hear of some major corporation getting attacked where a large set of their user data and credentials are compromised. We are also seeing that the pass the hash attacks are no longer theoretical. They're actually being used. What pass the hash really is, as opposed to using the actual credential, well, attackers have started using a hash of the same set of credentials and then replaying them to other resources to get unauthorized access. All of these are basically just a drawback of passwords in general. And of course, there are other solutions that we may want to go after, and we do have in place if you want to protect against password theft in the form of two-factor auth or perhaps smart card. But all of these options come either at the cost of usability or just increased operational costs. And so what we wanted to do was take a holistic look at everything that was wrong with passwords and actually come up with a solution that made the security better. At the same time, we did not want to compromise on the usability. And that is exactly what we wanted to do with Passport and Windows Hello. Now, Microsoft Passport is essentially a key-based authentication system that's built right into Windows 10. And what that really means is, as opposed to using your traditional username and password over the wire for authentication, it is now possible when we set up a user account that we create a key pair for this user, in which case the private key is actually securely stored on the device in a secure module, and the public key is actually backed up in the cloud. And any authentication flows from there on out use these private keys and public keys and sign payloads back and forth to ascertain the user's identity. So where Hello now comes in is, I mentioned that the private key is stored somewhere securely. Obviously, in order to guarantee security, we make sure that this key is only released after a user has expressed intent and has authorized it. And Windows Hello is an excellent way where a user can just seamlessly do that by using a fingerprint sensor that's available on your device or an iris scanner that may be available too. So with Microsoft Passport, we do away with the demerits of traditional passwords. At the same time, combining it with things like Windows Hello, we make sure that the usability doesn't suffer. And that's all I really wanted to talk about today. And as you can see, the Microsoft Passport and Windows Hello pieces are also very well encapsulated within the Web Account Manager layer. So if you're targeting Microsoft accounts or you're targeting Azure AD as the identity system, all you got to do is just continue to use those Web Account Manager APIs and you get the benefits seamlessly. Of course, Microsoft Passport and Windows Hello can be extended and can be applied to your own identity systems or to your own backend services too. For that, I highly recommend checking out a talk that my colleague Anush is going to also give, and it'll be posted online as well, and as well as some resources that I have pointers to at the end of this slide. So just to summarize, if you're an IT admin, Windows 10 has a bunch of great options for you to consider in the form of domain join, Azure AD join, as well as add a work account. If you're a developer, please use the Web Account Manager APIs to write apps that just are able to seamlessly sign the user in and get them to start using and loving your applications. And finally, let's together as an industry get rid of passwords and embrace Windows Passport and Microsoft Passport and Windows Hello. All right. For more details on all the things that I just covered in the form of Azure AD join, domain join, and how it can be enhanced to also connect to Azure AD resources, please check out these links that I have here. These are a great set of resources to go check out to get more details, as well as if you want to learn more about Web Account Manager APIs and get your hands on the samples that we have posted online, they're right here. And finally, if you want to learn more about Microsoft Passport and Windows Hello and how you can start leveraging this in your apps, these are some excellent resources for you to check out. That's all I had. Thank you for tuning in.